So since I was trying to think of something Christmas related to talk about, and of course having started my theatre reviews, i.e. my Broadway baby reviews, I've tried to think of something that might relate to that. However, a few years ago, I remember I did a review of the stage adaptation of my all-time favourite movie, Edward Scissorhands. And, well, looking back on it, I may have been a little bit harsh on it. So I've decided to do a redo of this review. First off, let me just say that Edward Scissorhands is my personal all-time favourite movie, where talking about it is just not enough to express how amazing this film is. As many know, this is probably Tim Burton's most personal film to date, as it came from a very personal drawing he did when he was a teenager, living in the suburban town of Burbank. The movie was released in 1990, starring Johnny Depp, Winona Ryder, Diane Wiest, and was Vincent Price's last role. When it was released, it has grown to be, and I quote from a Radio Times review, a masterpiece and one of the best fantasy films ever made. Rolling Stones stated when it was released that it's not perfect, it's better. Basically what I'm saying is, just watch Edward Scissorhands. Just watch it. So when I heard that there was a stage adaptation, I was intrigued. And after hearing it was a ballet, I was even more intrigued, as I thought this could work as an adaptation. The reason why I thought this was because the movie is very silent, especially as Edward hardly ever talks, and the lines he does say are very simple, which works as he is a creation and has not seen the outside world. Also, a lot of the film is quiet, as the most memorable moments have hardly any dialogue. You could tell the whole story with no dialogue, as well as the score composed by Danny Elfman could fit with ballet, as it has that fairy tale feeling, and many ballets are fairy tales. So I saw that there was a production in London during Christmas, so I got my ticket and had my chance to see it, and my first impression was, well, it was harsh. But here's the thing. Of course, going in, I know changes have to be made when adapting a film for the stage, so I knew it wasn't going to be exactly like the movie. And some changes were nice and fitted well for the stage, and a lot of the moments really did capture the spirit of the film, but others kinda missed the mark. I guess we should talk about the negative points first. Now, some are what you could say are nitpicks, like the comedy is sometimes a bit much. But I guess I have three main problems. First one is the way they portrayed Jim, the jock boyfriend who is a complete jerk, but while Jim in the movie was a complete asshole, he kind of slowly showed how much of one he was. At the start, he would just make fun of Edward and laugh, but as the movie continues, he kept revealing more reasons to hate him and how far he goes. In the stage show, he sort of reminds me of Stanley from A Streetcar Named Desire, from that sort of abusive relationship with Kim. It was a little too obvious. Although, to be fair, there is a scene where Kim is about to go off camping with her friends and Jim, and her father kind of has that sort of talk with Jim, like, now you kids don't do any funny business, and they're just like, yeah, whatever, and it's that was funny. That was funny. The second problem I have is when the town turns on Edward and things start to go downhill. Now, it's not the way they turn on him, but it's how sudden it all is. In the movie, Edward is caught by the police for breaking and entering, and even though Jim was the real culprit with Kim tagging along, Edward keeps this secret hidden. Not only does this start the downfall of Edward's and the Bog's respect from the neighbours, but once again shows Edward's kindness and his love for Kim. I mean, do I need to remind you of the quote? And yet things just keep getting worse for him. From his misunderstandings to the point where, as Peg quoted, maybe he should go back up there because at least there he's safe. Again, it's the gradual decrease that makes the audience feel the more for our main character, but also the joy that the only positive thing is the love Kim returns. No matter how many times I've seen it, it always makes me cry. In the show, during the Christmas party, there is a slight confrontation between Edward and Joyce's husband, blaming him for seducing his wife, even though we know that Joyce was the one trying to seduce Edward. And during this, he ends up accidentally cutting the wires on the Christmas tree, destroying the party. Now again, I don't have a problem with the scene because it does show the destructive nature of the Scissorhands, much like how in the movie Edward accidentally cuts both Kim and her little brother Kevin, so it shows the fear from the town. But I think accidentally hurting people, even though the audience knows that he was trying to help even save Kevin, makes the misunderstandings even more tragic. I felt like the movie had a good enough reason for why Edward returns to the mansion on the hill. Again, maybe it's just because the movie gradually shows the downfall, which I think the show could have told. But the worst part about the show is sadly a big one, especially for me, and that's the prologue and the inventor. Again, I was excited because the flashbacks with the inventor in the movie are done so visually with hardly any dialogue, and yet the connection between him and Edward is very genuine. In the show, we do see Edward created as well as when he starts to live, which was very well done as it does create a sort of Frankenstein vibe, but with that fairy tale feeling the movie has. No, the biggest problem is how the inventor dies, leaving Edward unfinished. In the movie, the inventor shows Edward his hands and even treats them like a Christmas present, but suddenly dies of a heart attack. What makes this scene so tragic and what moves me to tears is that, one, it's so sudden, and two, there is no one to blame. There's nothing that could be done, and yet the fact that the connection between them was so strong and that Edward was so close to being complete. In the show, the death happens soon after Edward is born on Halloween night, and Jim and his mates go up to the mansion, plays a prank dressed as clowns, and this scares the inventor to death. What the f- So, yeah. Am I saying that this is a show that's not worth sitting through if you love the movie or haven't seen the movie? Well, no. There are very positive things about it. Like, the choreography, for one thing, was spectacular. I mean, I'm aware that Matthew Bourne is quite a big name in the world of ballet, and I can see why. He clearly knows how to tell a story through dance, whether if it's comic, tragic, romantic, suspenseful. So while I don't agree with some of the changes I mentioned before, the way they communicate was impressive, and when they do capture the spirit of the movie, it's all the more beautiful. In fact, talking about beauty, let's talk about the visuals. It really did look and feel like the movie. In fact, I would even argue that some moments in the show looks like something out of Tim Burton's own artwork. This would make sense, as Edward Scissorhands all started with a drawing. The world of suburbia in which Edward experiences, the town displays the pastel colours, and you can identify the characters such as Peg, Joyce, Esmeralda, and so on. It showed both the satire of suburbia as well as giving a fairy tale feel, expressing the emotion. While some scenes aren't exactly how the characters were from the film, the emotion was still there. For example, when Peg first comes across Edward is when he wanders down into the town himself. Now, I can't imagine Edward really wandering in as he would stay in the mansion, but the emotion of Peg's fear but sympathy for him is still there. Same goes for the romance between Edward and Kim. While I do feel the romance doesn't develop as well in the movie, in some cases it's quite sporadic in the show, but the moments they have are as touching. I don't think I need to say much about the ice dance, but that was the best scene in the show, as it exactly was how it was in the movie, but with theatrical dance, and Danny Elfman's score fits it perfectly. At the end of the day, it's hard for me not to, pick all the little problems of the stage show because, well, it is my favourite film. It's an extremely personal film to me. I cannot express just how amazing it is. To me, it is a masterpiece. I love every frame, every note of the score, just every emotion it brings. But I will say this. I am glad I did see the stage adaptation, because it was interesting to see it in another medium, and it does seem to fit well for the most part. I shouldn't really complain too much, because at the end of the day, it does capture the main message and the same image of Edward Scissorhands. The feeling of the misunderstood. To me, that's the beauty of Edward Scissorhands. It's a story, a character, an image that represents all of us at one point or another. And so any adaptation or any way of celebrating this wonderful creation is certainly welcomed. Thank you for watching, and Merry Christmas.